I'm Nora, and this is the night my voice finally learned to stop shaking. I wish I could say it happened in a quiet moment with soft music and a forgiving moon, but no. My turning began under two bright chandeliers and the clatter of dessert spoons at my aunt's charity gala, where everyone wore their kindness like diamonds, and my cousin Olivia laughed at me as if my pain were a punchline. I remember my palms pressing damp crescents into the satin of my dress, trying to will myself smaller while Olivia's voice skimmed across the room like a knife. Nora, sweetie, maybe next time you'll read the instructions before trying to help, she said, cheeks lifting as cameras flashed around her. Some of us are better at organizing than whatever it is you do all day. I stood beside the silent auction table where I had misprinted the bidding sheets, apparently missing a zero that turned a 10,000 minimum into 1,000. My stomach plummeted when I noticed the line of neatly written bids, all too low, all officially valid because the chairwoman, my Aunt Margaret, had already announced the rules. My mistake could cost the foundation thousands. I had volunteered to help Olivia because she was the star of our family television smile, glossy hair that never frizzed, a social media halo that made strangers call her inspirational. She ran the event every year and posted photos of herself in gowns with captions about giving back. My job, unspoken and unpaid, was to be invisible support, double check the RSVPs, carry extra pens, smile at donors whose eyes skipped past me to find her. Don't be harsh, my mother murmured, stepping between us with the strange sweetness she wore like perfume, a scent that gave me a headache. Everyone makes mistakes, Liv. Mom's eyes flicked toward my face, searching, warning, pleading. Nora tried her best. Olivia's mouth curved into a pitying, "Oh, I know, Aunt Layla, I'm just teasing. That's what family is for, right?" She tapped the edge of a bid sheet with a manicured finger. "Anyway, it's not the end of the world. We'll just ask the donors to be generous beyond the written minimum. I'm sure they will for me." She flashed that red lipstick smile around the room, and even the waiters seemed to stand taller. I heard my own voice, faint and apologetic. "I can reprint the sheets and run them around. There's still time before the close." Olivia tilted her head. "You think you can fix it? Adorable." She laughed, and a few nearby donors laughed with her, not because it was funny, but because it was safer to stay on her side of the room. She tossed a lock of hair over her shoulder, and I saw what the cameras loved, a glittering girl in a silver gown, light pooling around her like a spotlight that obeyed her hand. "No, dear. Please don't touch anything else. Just mingle. Smile. You look pretty when you're quiet." Something in me lurched sideways. My chest, my throat, my scalp, everything prickled as if I had stepped into an electric fence. I wanted to say, "I'm not your assistant," or "You're not as kind as you pretend to be," or even, "I deserve to be here." But shame is a strong glue, and for years I had let it paste my lips shut. So I nodded, and my mother exhaled, and Olivia swiveled back to her circle of admirers. Her fiancé Daniel with his dimple and his shareholder smile, her best friend Sadie, who curated Olivia's world like a museum exhibit, Aunt Margaret, who insisted Olivia had a rare gift for leadership, as if the rest of us were just plastic chairs. I drifted to the edge of the ballroom where the wall blooms were taped over the electrical sockets. I watched as Olivia moved through the room, conducting everyone's attention. And I thought about the box under my bed at home, my notebooks, the ones I didn't show anyone, because every time I tried, Olivia would say, "Oh, that's cute. You're writing again," in a tone that meant childish, invisible, small. The notebooks were filled with lists and conversations I wished I'd had, the spine of a story I'd been building for years without the courage to give it bones. A strange, cold clarity sliced through my embarrassment. I was tired. Tired of apologizing for wanting to be seen. Tired of being the one who slipped past in photographs, a blur near the exit. "Drink, miss." A waiter paused beside me with a tray of champagne flutes, eyes kind enough to make me feel visible for 3 entire seconds. "Thank you." My hand shook as I took a glass. I turned it in the light, watched the bubbles sprint to the surface and pop like tiny promises. Perhaps because I was half hidden by a marble column? Perhaps because people have always assumed I'm harmless? I overheard Sadie's voice drift from the adjacent conversation like smoke. "It's honestly tragic," she was saying. "Nora always looks like she's about to cry, makes her so unphotogenic. Some faces just don't take to the lens." Olivia didn't lower her voice. "I know, I keep trying to help. I told her she just needs to find a hobby that suits her. Some people aren't meant to be public facing." A tiny pause. "But I can use her. She's loyal." Daniel laughed. You're soft as ever. Live. A heat rose from my stomach so bright and raw I could hear it. My fingers tightened around the stem of the glass until the thin crystal threatened to snap. In my mind, a door that had always been closed swung open. Memory after memory spilled through. The seventh grade science fair where I wore Olivia's old dress, and she told me it wasn't flattering right before photos. The Christmas Eve when I got her the wrong candle scent, and she pinched my arm under the table, smiling while I winced. The night 2 years ago, when I told her about the internship I wanted, and she said, you hate pressure, but if you really think you can handle it, go for it. In the same tone my pediatrician used when he told me to be brave for a shot. That internship had been at a small publishing house downtown. It would have put me inside the very rooms where stories were made. I almost applied. Then Olivia invited me to help with her charity event, just this once. And somehow, just this once stretched into a season, then a year, then two. The door inside me opened a little wider. Behind it, I could hear the rustle of paper, the groan of something ancient waking up. Excuse me. I stepped away from the column and into their circle before I could talk myself out of it. 4 faces turned. The shock of my boldness seemed to put a hairline crack in the glass of the moment. I smiled without showing teeth, the way Olivia did. There's still time to fix the sheets, I said. I'll take responsibility. I made the error. Daniel's gaze flicked down my dress as if searching for a tag. I wondered if he talked to people or inventory. It's a little late for heroics, isn't it? My mother arrived at my elbow like a lifeguard, breathless with good intentions. Nora, sweetheart, I'll reprint the forms. I continued, because if I stopped, I knew I would disappear again and spend the entire night resenting myself. I'll hand them to each table. I'll explain the mistake, and I'll ask for the minimum to be honored verbally. Everyone respects the foundation, they'll agree. I looked at Aunt Margaret. I can do it in 15 minutes. Silence pressed like a thumb on the room's pulse. Aunt Margaret's eyes, a cold, polished hazel, measured me the way a jeweler measures something and decides its cubic zirconia. We are not changing the rules at this stage, she said. We have donors flying in from Minneapolis and Dubai, and we've already set expectations. We can't risk a scene. No one wants a scene, Olivia chimed in. She had the soft, sympathetic smile of someone about to apologize for you. It's sweet you want to be helpful, Nora, but we've got it. Why don't you sit with Mom and enjoy the desserts? You like the lemon tartlets. They all watched me, my mother with a damp lash plea, Aunt Margaret with firmness that meant don't embarrass us, Daniel with a smirk that meant we both know she won't push this, and Olivia with an amused patience that said, see, this is your place, near the wall with the small people. Something in my chest clicked into place, sharp as a lock sliding. I nodded. You're right, I said, my voice steadier than my heart. No scenes. I walked to the bar, set down my untouched champagne, and slipped through a side door into the service hallway, where the walls were painted a tired beige and the floor smelled like mops. When I was beyond the corner, I pressed my back to the cool concrete and let my breath come rough. My phone vibrated in my clutch. A text from my cousin Maya flickered on the screen. Heard about the sheets. You okay? Call me if you need to escape. Maya, the one person in our family who didn't orbit Olivia like a planet. I typed a reply. Fine, just embarrassed. Then paused, deleting the words letter by letter because a sudden, dangerous thought had entered me. I didn't want to escape. I wanted to stay. I wanted to watch the whole room applaud Olivia when she raised a record amount. And then I wanted to go home and open the box under my bed and pull out the notebooks I had abandoned because someone else's voice was louder than my own. I wanted to stop treating my fear as wisdom. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. A staff member pushed past with a tray of coffee cups. A woman in a headset clicked by, whispering into her mic, 10 minutes to speeches. 10 minutes. The program would start, the foundation would be praised, Olivia would float to the microphone and do the thing she did best, convert admiration into currency. I closed my eyes and saw the storylines I never allowed to leave their notebooks. The ones with messy girls who didn't apologize well, who made mistakes and then made different choices. I saw a character who worked backstage at a theater and one day stepped onto the stage not to act, but to reclaim something she'd lost. She didn't need a script to tell the truth. I returned to the ballroom just as the lights dimmed to that ceremonial twilight where faces looked kinder. The MC, a local news anchor with a voice like warm bread, introduced Aunt Margaret first. Aunt Margaret spoke about the foundation's programs, mentoring teens, rebuilding community sites after storms. The projects were real and good, which made the family's performance around them even crueler. Then she called up the visionary heart of this event, and Olivia rose glowing. She took Daniel's hand for 3 public seconds, kissed his cheek, and mounted the stage amid a flurry of phone cameras. I slipped into a chair at the back beside the coat check. My mother found a seat near the front, her posture an essay on nerves. Thank you, everyone. Olivia began, clear and glossy, the kind of voice that pretends it's hugging you. I'm beyond humbled by your generosity. Applause sighed around the room. Tonight, we're not just giving money, we're telling every child we serve, we see you. You matter. She paused like a pastor, letting the sentiment settle. I stand here because family taught me the meaning of service. My mother, Margaret, who raised me to love our community. My Aunt Layla, whose quiet strength inspires me daily. And my cousin Nora, a calculated smile, who is always willing to help. People turned their heads to look for me, as if I were a decorative plant Olivia might point to. My cheeks burned, but my spine held. I met my mother's eyes. She smiled back, relief flooding her expression, as if she had just watched me pass a test by refusing to cause trouble. If I had stood then, if I had marched up to the microphone and told the room what Olivia had said in the corner, about my face, about my usefulness, I knew how the script would end: a scandal, a family scolding, weeks of being called dramatic. And then it hit me with a shimmer that felt like fate. Revealing the truth didn't have to mean screaming under chandeliers. It could mean building a stage my cousin could not control. Let's begin our bidding? Olivia cried, beaming. And let's remember the minimums are a gesture, not a ceiling. A wave of laughter, of wallets opening. I watched, and the anger that had scorched me half an hour earlier began to turn into something cleaner, like wind passing through a window newly opened. I realized with a sudden, strange gratitude that Olivia had given me the most honest gift she could, not the humiliation about the sheets, not the misprinted numbers or the mockery about my supposed usefulness, but the proof, undeniable, public, crisp as the click of a camera shutter, that she didn't see me. She didn't even wonder what I could do. She believed, with her whole perfumed heart, that I was a quiet prop. I could use that. After the speeches, as people drifted to the dessert tables and a jazz trio started playing, Olivia radiated through clusters of donors like a heat lamp. I could almost watch the physics of her attention, how she'd land on a guest, warm them, watch them open. It was a skill, I'll give her that. She had a sociologist's eye for where money sat. I slipped behind the silent auction easels and quietly, efficiently collected the misprinted sheets, replaced them with updated forms I printed from the administrative office I'd seen down the hall. Yes, I ignored Aunt Margaret's instruction. I wrote amended minimum, the 10 zals, and in thick marker across the top of each sheet. Every time someone noticed, I smiled. An early typo was corrected. I said, thanks for your generosity. No one argued. The donors, it turned out, didn't care about which minimum number was printed. They were there to look generous. The exact price of the halo was flexible. I felt a pocket of relief open under my ribs. I could fix things too. At the table near the stage, my mother laughed at something Daniel said and touched the pearl at her throat. She was beautiful in a soft, dimmed way I had inherited but never learned to switch on. When she saw me, she lifted her hand in a small wave. I waved back and my heart clenched. That was the thing about my mother. She loved me, and somehow her love had taught me to shrink, not because she wanted me small, but because she didn't know another way to keep me safe. In our family, safety meant pleasing Olivia, which meant arranging yourself around her like furniture. Tonight, something inside me whispered, no more. When the event ended and the lights rose to their practical brightness, revealing the scuff marks on the floor and the lipstick prints on glassware, Olivia found me stacking programs by a trash bin. You fixed the sheets, she said, hands on hips, smile sharp as a paper cut. You weren't supposed to touch them. It worked, I said simply. She leaned in, her perfume sweet and expensive and suffocating. I know what you're doing, Nora. You want to be noticed. You want to prove you can run things. That's cute. But there's a difference between being the face and doing the labor, and we both know where you shine. Her voice softened into that pharmaceutical tone, soothing, scripted. There's honor in backstage. I know, I said. I've been backstage my whole life. I held her gaze for 3 seconds, longer than I ever had, and I watched something flicker in her eyes, confusion, maybe that I hadn't nodded, and disappeared. She recovered quickly. Good, she said, almost cheerful. Then keep it up? She tapped my arm as if I were a vending machine that had produced her favorite snack. Big weekend coming. Daniel and I are shooting the pre-wedding video. I'll need you to manage props, maybe do some behind-the-scenes stories for my Instagram. Low angle, soft focus, you know the drill. I'll text you details. I'm busy this weekend, I said. Her smile stalled. Doing what? Something for me. She blinked as if a fly had landed on her lens. Then she laughed a bright little bell. Sure, of course. See you at brunch Sunday? She turned, hair swinging like a curtain, and joined Daniel and Aunt Margaret near the exit where cameras still blinked. I watched them, noting how easily the world conspired to applaud her, and I thought of the Polaroids in my notebooks, the rough drafts, the overheard lines, the scenes I'd sketched on bus tickets and coffee sleeves. I thought of the internship email still starred in my inbox, the one I hadn't responded to 2 years ago. The person who sent it, Jules, had written, "Your voice is clear and honest. I'd love to see more." And I'd folded myself into gratitude and fear and said nothing. I pulled out my phone, found the thread, and typed "Hey, Jules. Are you still taking submissions for the Emerging Voices feature? I've been working on something. I can send pages tonight." My thumb hovered. I pressed send. Outside, the night air surprised me with its sweetness, damp with jasmine from the landscaping and city street exhaust. I stood beneath the portico while valet attendants jogged for cars. A woman with glitter on her cheeks laughed into a phone. Daniel appeared at my shoulder, hands in his pockets. "Bold move in there," he said. His cologne was a calmer version of Olivia's, a consultancy version of seduction. "Liv's not a big fan of surprises." "I noticed," I said. He watched me with an interest I didn't like. "You know, I always tell her, let Nora have a little spotlight. But you know Liv. She's protective. The brand is delicate." "The brand," I repeated. I imagined pressing his words into my notebook, pinning them like beetles. "You're good for her," he added, steadying, familiar. "That counts for a lot." He smiled, small and confidential, as if he were offering me a prize. "Not everyone is built for the front." "Maybe," I said, tasting the lie like a coin in my mouth. "Good night, Daniel." Would at home, I kicked off my shoes and pulled the box from under my bed. My room smelled like laundry and ink. I sat on the floor cross-legged, flipping through spines. The pages were a map of the person I kept losing and finding. I pulled out one notebook at random and found a line I'd written a year ago, and then pretended I hadn't. "I don't want to be brave only after the world is kind to me. I want to be brave first." That line trembled in my hands like a small animal. I opened my laptop, breathed, and started typing, not perfectly, not gracefully, but wholly the way water moves when the dam breaks. The first pages came in a rush: a girl at a gala, her cousin in silver, the smell of lemon tartlets in power. I wrote the waitress's chipped thumbnail, the exact way Olivia's voice tilted on adorable, the way my mother's pearl trembled at her throat. I wrote what it felt like to finally meet my own gaze and not look away. At midnight, I attached the pages to an email to Jules and pressed send, not because I imagined it would erase years of silence, but because not sending it had become a costume I no longer fit. Then, without meaning to, I slept for 6 hours straight for the first time in months. I awoke to light slanting across the wall and 4 new messages. One was from Olivia. "Brunch at 11. Wear something cheerful. We're filming a little family montage. Daniel says you look too serious sometimes. Don't skull, okay? Love you, oh." With a string of glittering hearts that felt like confetti at a funeral. One was from my mother. "Proud of you for helping last night. Please don't fight with Olivia today. Let's have a nice brunch." The third was from Jules. "Nora," it read, "thank you for trusting me with these pages. They have a pulse. I'd like to see more 40 pages. If you have them by next Friday, if not 2 weeks. Let me know if you're open to notes. P.S. The way you wrote the cousin's smile is devastating. Keep going." I stared at the screen, and something in my chest unfolded like a new wing. Then I saw the fourth message, an Instagram notification. Someone had tagged me in a story. I clicked, and there she was, Olivia, in morning light, perfect even in her pajamas, her hair in a glossy knot. The caption read, "Last night was magical. Family is everything." Nora writes, "You're my rock." A boomerang of her blowing me a kiss followed, saccharine enough to rot teeth. Soulful music played. In the last frame, tiny white text against a filtered sunset. She had written, "It's so important to lift the quieter ones. Everyone has a place." The words were silk wrapped around a choke. My thumb hovered over the heart icon, and I felt the old reflex coil to perform gratitude. Then a thought clearer than any rose-filtered story. She's building a version of me people will believe if I keep letting her narrate it. The wing in my chest flexed. I did not tap the heart. At brunch, the family was arranged like a photograph. Aunt Margaret at the head of the table, Olivia and Daniel across from each other, my mother beside me squeezing my knee under the table each time the conversation shifted dangerously. The restaurant's windows rattled with early rainfall. Olivia, pink and polished, was explaining their pre-wedding video concept to the server as if the server were a production assistant. We want something authentic, she said. Candid but curated. I watched her. I watched how even her sips of coffee were part of the scene. I could feel the shape of a story forming under my tongue, the place where anger could be sharpened into something useful. When she asked me, "You'll help, right?" I looked at her and said, "No, I have pages to write." The table stilled. Pages, Aunt Margaret repeated, unable to imagine words as more valuable than favors. "I'm submitting a piece to a magazine," I said. Olivia's laugh was airy and quick. "Oh, that's nice. A little side project." She glanced at Daniel, a private signal passing between them like a wire. "Just don't write about us." She winked, adding a laugh to soften it. "Kitty, you're not that kind of girl." In that exact moment, I knew two true things. Olivia had built an identity for me that fit neatly in her spotlight's shadow, and if I kept living inside it, I would deserve it. The second true thing rose like dawn. My cousin, the master of appearances, had a secret, her biggest lie, and if I wanted the kind of revenge that wasn't just loud but true, I would need to find it, hold it up to the light, and let it speak for itself. I lifted my coffee, met Olivia's eyes, and smiled in a way she had taught me, but never expected to see turned back on her. "You're right," I said. "I'm not that kind of girl." I took a slow sip. Not anymore. When the check came, Olivia did her usual performance, reaching for it, pausing just long enough for Daniel to insist on paying. Aunt Margaret dabbed her lips with a linen napkin. "We should all be grateful," she said, and I wondered what was and what gratitude was supposed to cost. Outside, the rain had turned soft. I told my mother I needed to walk. "Nora," Mom said, searching my face. "I know you're hurt, but try not to provoke. It never ends well." "I'm not provoking," I said. "I'm choosing." I kissed her cheek and stepped into the wet, bright day. Where the city smelled like possibility and rain, I pulled my jacket tighter, thumbed open my notes app, and typed 4 words that made me almost giddy, like a key dropped into my palm from nowhere. Olivia's biggest lie. I didn't know yet what filled the blank, but I knew the hunt had begun, not for gossip, not for a headline, but for the truth she'd buried under sequins. My breath fogged. Steady. I thought of the line I'd written, "Be brave first," and I smiled. My voice had stopped shaking, not because the world finally softened, but because I was done performing silence. I had a cousin who laughed at my pain. She was about to hear my story. I wasn't born with the expectation of greatness hanging around my neck. That necklace, heavy and glittering, had been clasped around Olivia's throat before she could even walk. From my earliest memories, she was the one people gathered around at family events, their voices high-pitched with delight, their cameras always tilted in her direction. "Look at those curls. She's going to be a star," Aunt Margaret would declare, snapping another photo of Olivia smeared in birthday cake, while I, 3 months older, sat quietly beside her with my hair sticking out in static clumps. No one noticed my smile unless Olivia reached over to tug my ear or grab my toy, and then I'd cry and they'd laugh, and she'd beam because even my pain gave her attention. Growing up in our family felt like walking onto a stage where the script had already been written, but my lines had been erased. My mother, Layla, tried to balance things in her quiet way, buying me matching dresses so I wouldn't feel left out, slipping extra strawberries on my plate when no one was looking, but she had a softness that bent easily under Margaret's sharper edges. Aunt Margaret wasn't cruel in the way that left bruises. She was cruel in the way that left you doubting your worth. Her praise was a spotlight, and she never aimed it at me. "Olivia, your recital was breathtaking." "What control? What poise?" Then, glancing at me, "Nora, dear, you look comfortable." When we were little, Olivia and I shared everything: schools, cousins, backyards. But sharing with Olivia always meant I got the leftovers. On Halloween, she'd insist we swap candy until she had every chocolate bar, and I was left with lollipops and gum. At Christmas, she'd volunteer to pass out the gifts so she could open hers last, dragging out the attention while I unwrapped mine in silence. At every family reunion, she'd grab my wrist and whisper, Don't talk too much. You're not good at telling stories. Just let me do it. I listened because I thought maybe she was right. The truth is, I love stories. I loved words the way other kids loved swings or basketball. I'd scribble in spiral notebooks, making up entire worlds where girls like me weren't background characters. They were warriors, dreamers, rebels who spoke and were heard. But every time I tried to share, Olivia had a way of cutting me down with a smile. That's sweet, Nora, but don't you think it's a little childish? Stories don't matter in the real world. She'd roll her eyes and tell the others, Nora's pretending again. And they'd laugh, not unkindly, but with that dismissive chuckle that says, yes, we agree, this is silly. My father wasn't around much. He left when I was 9, and though Mom never said it out loud, I knew Olivia's family looked down on us for it. Margaret loved to sigh and tell people, Lila does her best, but it's hard raising Nora without a proper father figure. She'd say it at parties right in front of me, as if I were deaf. Meanwhile, Olivia's dad, Uncle Richard, was the picture of presence. He was a banker with a booming laugh, the kind of man who clapped his daughter on the back after a piano recital and shouted, "That's my girl!" People adored him, and by extension, they adored Olivia even more. There's one memory that still burns. I must have been 12. Olivia had just won first place in a city-wide art competition. The family gathered for dinner at our house, and Margaret insisted on a toast. She stood, glass raised high, and declared, Olivia has the gift. She will make us proud. I know it. Everyone clapped, and I too clapped for my cousin because I did love her then, even when she eclipsed me. Afterward, while helping clear the dishes, I showed Margaret a poem I'd written. It was about the ocean, how it swallowed secrets and returned them as shells. She skimmed the lines, her smile thin. Sweetheart, she said, patting my shoulder. That's nice, but not everyone is meant to shine on stage. Some of us are better suited to support others. That was Margaret's gift, to diminish you while sounding like she was guiding you. I believed her. I stuffed the poem into a drawer and didn't write again for months. By high school, Olivia's star power was undeniable. She was captain of the debate team, homecoming queen, editor of the yearbook, and always the one teachers praised. I was Olivia's cousin, even when we weren't in the same class. My grades were good, but not stellar. My talents, writing, listening, noticing, weren't celebrated skills, they were invisible ones. At family gatherings, Olivia would brag about her achievements while I smiled quietly, and someone, usually Margaret, would say, "We're so proud of Olivia." And Nora helps too. She's dependable. Dependable. That word became my label, stamped across my chest. Dependable meant you wouldn't cause trouble, you wouldn't outshine, you wouldn't demand more than the scraps handed down to you. Dependable meant invisible. Yet, there were moments, brief, shimmering, where I almost broke free. My English teacher in 10th grade, Mrs. Harrington, pulled me aside after class one day. She held my essay in her hand, red pen circling words, but not slashing them. Nora, she said, her voice firm but kind. You have a voice. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I went home glowing, daring to believe. But when I showed Olivia my essay, she smirked. You're not seriously thinking of becoming a writer, are you? Writers don't make money, Nora. Be realistic. That night, I tucked the essay into my notebook and didn't mention it again. College was another story. I wanted to apply for creative writing programs, but Mom gently steered me toward communications. Practical, safe, she said. Margaret chimed in with, Olivia will be in business. Nora should choose something supportive, maybe nonprofit work. She has the heart for it. It was decided for me like so many things, and I obeyed because obedience had been drilled into my bones. Olivia, meanwhile, soared. She built her brand in college: beauty, brains, and benevolence. Her Instagram grew, her networking skills sharpened, and by graduation, she was already chairing committees and organizing galas. Everyone adored her, and I became her shadow. She'd call me with requests. Nora, can you proofread this speech? Or, Nora, can you run errands before the event? And I always said yes, because saying no felt like breaking some unspoken rule of our family. You don't outshine Olivia. What no one knew was that I still wrote. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I filled notebook after notebook with words I never shared. They became my secret rebellion, my only place to exist fully. In those pages, I wasn't dependable Nora, the quiet cousin. I was fierce, bold, unafraid. I built worlds where girls like me weren't overlooked. They were heroes. But by morning, those worlds went back into the box under my bed, and I went back to being Olivia's helper. Years passed in that rhythm. her rising higher, me standing beside her, smiling in photographs I never asked to be part of. My mother clung to the idea that family unity mattered more than pride. It's easier this way, she'd whisper when I came home hurt after another of Olivia's barbed comments. Don't make waves, sweetheart. Life is hard enough. And maybe she was right for a time. But the truth, I carried a growing fire inside me. Each insult, each dismissal, each moment I was shoved to the side, it all stacked like dry wood. And though I didn't realize it yet, I was waiting for the spark that would set it all ablaze. That spark came the night of the gala, the night Olivia laughed at my pain in front of everyone. But it wasn't just that moment. It was the culmination of years of small humiliations, of being told I was less, of watching her build a world where she was the star and I was nothing more than a prop. As I sat on the edge of my bed after that night, notebooks spread around me, I thought about every single time I'd swallowed my words, every poem I'd hidden, every dream I'd shelved. And for the first time, I asked myself, what if Margaret was wrong? What if Olivia was wrong? What if I wasn't meant to be silent at all? And that question, dangerous, electric, was the first true crack in the walls that had kept me small for so long. After the gala, I told myself I could endure it, that maybe, just maybe, Olivia's barbs had been sharper because of the stress of the night. That's what my mother always said. Olivia doesn't mean it, Nora. She's under pressure. Don't take it to heart. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that what happened in the corner of that ballroom was a fluke, not a pattern. But life has a way of proving you wrong when you're clinging to excuses. The weeks after the gala were a blur of preparations for Olivia's wedding. It was all anyone in the family could talk about. The venue had already been secured, an ivy-covered estate just outside the city, the kind of place people rented for films and fairy tales. Daniel's family was wealthy, old, money wealthy, and they wanted a spectacle. Margaret, of course, had taken the reins. My mother and I were folded into the planning committee without ever being asked. You'll help with the guest list, won't you, Nora? Margaret said one afternoon, her tone not really a question. Olivia needs everything perfect. She can't be bogged down with small details. Yes, Aunt Margaret, I said, because what else could I say? From then on, my evenings were spent hunched over spreadsheets and envelopes, cross-checking names and addresses, while Olivia basked in fittings and tastings. Sometimes she'd send me texts like, make sure the lighting company gets my rider, soft amber, never harsh white. Or, don't forget to triple check Sadie's seating card. She had us it when her name is spelled wrong. It would have been easier if she ever thanked me. But Olivia's idea of gratitude was a public performance that painted me as her assistant rather than her equal. At brunches, she'd smile sweetly and say, I don't know what I'd do without Nora. She keeps the boring stuff off my plate so I can focus on the magic. People would laugh, admiring her humility, while I felt myself shrink a little smaller. The humiliation peaked during her bridal shower. It was held at Margaret's house, a sprawling colonial with pristine gardens and portraits of ancestors lining the walls. Dozens of women attended, friends, cousins, distant relatives I barely remembered. Olivia was radiant in a cream dress, twirling as gifts piled up around her. And then, as the laughter swelled, Margaret clinked her glass. Everyone, she said, before we continue, let's give a round of applause to Nora. She's been Olivia's right hand through all this planning. She's truly dependable. The word dropped like a stone into my stomach. Dependable. Always dependable. The women clapped politely, some smiling at me, others barely glancing my way. Olivia beamed, reaching over to squeeze my hand as though I were a child. Yes, thank you, Nora. We all know planning isn't your strong suit, but you've done your best. The laughter that followed was soft, harmless on the surface, but I felt it in my bones. A joke at my expense, woven into praise. I forced a smile, the kind I'd perfected over years of practice, while inside my chest a storm brewed. Later that evening, as we cleaned up, I overheard Olivia talking to her bridesmaids in the kitchen. Her voice was casual, but each word cut like glass. Nora's sweet, but I can't trust her with the big stuff. She messes things up when there's pressure. Did you see the gala fiasco? I had to smooth everything over. Honestly, it's better if she just does the grunt work. She doesn't have the personality for leadership. The bridesmaids laughed, clinking their glasses. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hands trembling around the stack of plates I carried. They hadn't seen me. They didn't care if I heard. When I told my mother later, hoping she might finally admit Olivia's cruelty, she sighed. Nora, don't be so sensitive. Olivia's under so much stress with the wedding. She doesn't mean anything by it. But she did mean it. She always meant it. And each time, I was left holding the shards of my dignity, pretending they didn't cut. As the wedding drew closer, the pressure intensified. Olivia's requests became demands. She called me at all hours. Can you pick up my dress from the tailor? Can you confirm the florist is using white peonies, not cream? Can you drive Margaret to the tasting? Daniel's busy. But one night, exhausted, I tried to say no. Olivia, I have work tomorrow. I can't run across town just to check on candles. There was silence on the line. Then her voice, soft and sharp, Nora, I thought you wanted to be part of this. Family is everything. If you can't even manage candles, what's the point of you helping at all? The words gutted me, and before I knew it, I was apologizing, promising to go, because that was what I did. I carried the weight, and she wore the crown. The final blow came at the rehearsal dinner. It was a grand affair, hosted at the estate. The guests dined under strings of lights, laughter echoing across manicured lawns. Olivia stood with Daniel, radiant as ever, thanking everyone for coming. Then she gestured toward me. And of course, she said, her voice carrying through the microphone, a special thanks to my cousin Nora, who's been like my little assistant throughout this journey. She's not great with the spotlight, but she shines behind the scenes. The crowd laughed warmly, raising glasses in my direction. I stood, cheeks burning, trapped in their applause. My mother clapped too, smiling nervously as though urging me to play along. And I did. I raised my glass, forcing my lips to curve upward, while inside something cracked wide open. I left early that night, slipping away before dessert. Alone in my room, I opened my notebooks and stared at the blank page. My pen hovered, but the words wouldn't come. All I could hear was Olivia's voice, echoing, not great with the spotlight, not trustworthy under pressure, not enough. Tears blurred the page, and for the first time in years, I didn't write. I just sat there, shaking, drowning in the weight of her cruelty. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain, a spark caught. I thought of Mrs. Harrington's words, you have a voice. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I thought of Jules's emails still glowing in my inbox. I thought of all the times Olivia had laughed at my pain, building her empire on the backs of people like me. And I realized something. Olivia's power wasn't in her kindness. It was in her control of the narrative. She decided who was worthy of attention, who was useful, who mattered. And everyone went along with it because it was easier. But narratives could be rewritten. Stories could be stolen back. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to stop playing the dependable background character and start writing the story myself. The humiliation, the laughter, the years of dismissal, they weren't just wounds, they were fuel, and I was done swallowing the smoke. The night of the rehearsal dinner left me hollow. I went home, sat on my bed with my dress still on, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My makeup had smudged, my hair was limp, and my eyes, those eyes, looked like they belonged to someone I didn't recognize, someone smaller than she really was, someone erased. Olivia's voice kept replaying in my head. She's like my little assistant. She shines behind the scenes. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the way Daniel smirked at me like I should be grateful for the scraps of acknowledgement. It all pulsed like poison in my veins. For a long time, I just sat there, frozen. And then, like a tide pulling back to reveal something buried, the fury came. I shoved open the drawer under my bed, yanked out the box of notebooks, and dumped them across the floor. Pages fluttered everywhere, spilling secrets and fragments of the self I had hidden for years. I leafed through them, my hands trembling. There it was, every insult Olivia had ever thrown at me scribbled into the margins. Every line I'd written about girls who found their voices. Every unfinished story where someone like me finally stood up. My breath grew ragged as I realized I'd been preparing for this moment my entire life without even knowing it. That night I didn't cry. I planned. First, I thought about Olivia's weaknesses. For years I'd watched her carefully, noting the cracks in her perfect veneer. She lived for appearances, her brand, her reputation, the flawless narrative she spun for her followers and our family. Her entire empire was built on perception. If I could show people who she really was, not the angelic philanthropist, but the manipulative, vain, cruel Olivia, I could take away everything she held dear. But I couldn't do it rashly. Olivia was too skilled at twisting things. If I simply confronted her, she'd spin the story back on me. Nora's jealous, Nora's dramatic, Nora's unstable. People would believe her because they always had. No, my revenge had to be quiet, undeniable, and devastating. I started small. I saved every cruel text she had ever sent me. Don't embarrass me tonight. Make sure you stay out of the photos. You ruin the aesthetic. Try not to screw this up like last time. Years of digital venom, all tucked neatly into a folder. Then I thought of the conversations I had overheard, the kitchen whispers at the bridal shower, her mocking jokes about me, her confessions about using people for clout. If I could capture that side of her even just once, I could pierce her armor. My mind drifted back to something Daniel had said, half joking at brunch weeks ago. Liv's brand is delicate. He was right. It was fragile as glass. All it needed was the right crack. And dependable Nora was going to make that crack. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week before the wedding, Olivia asked me to help at a content day, a staged photo and video shoot for her social media. She wanted behind the scenes footage, styled candids, the whole glossy fa-8 of preparation. Just bring your phone, she said. You're good at catching my angles. Oh, and don't talk too much on set. People get distracted. Her words barely stung this time. Instead, I smiled sweetly. Of course, Olivia, whatever you need. The shoot was at a luxury studio downtown, all white walls and golden light. Olivia floated around in silk robes, hair in rollers, while makeup artists buzzed around her. I moved quietly, phone in hand, filming just as she wanted. But what she didn't know was that my phone had an app running in the background, recording every word she said. I caught her complaining about vendors. If the florist messes up, I'll ruin her on Instagram. I caught her mocking Daniel. He's handsome enough, but God, he's boring. At least he photographs well. I caught her dismissing her own charity work. Of course, I care about the kids, but the donors don't need to know I never actually visit the sites. Who has time? Each sentence was a knife she had sharpened herself, and I collected them one by one, sliding them into the sheath of my revenge. That night, I listened to the recordings with my headphones in, my heart pounding. Proof, real, undeniable proof of who she truly was. My hands shook as I saved the files, labeled them carefully, and backed them up in 3 different places. But I wasn't finished. Proof alone wouldn't be enough. I needed timing. I needed spectacle. I needed her downfall to land exactly when she expected the world to be clapping the loudest. Her wedding. The thought made me gasp even to myself. To ruin her on her wedding day. It was bold, brutal, poetic. The very stage she had been building for years would become the stage of her collapse, and dependable Nora, would be the one to pull the curtain. Still, I hesitated. Revenge is intoxicating, but it's also terrifying. What if people turned on me instead? What if my mother begged me to stop, told me I was destroying the family? I paced my room for hours, notebook in hand, scribbling lists of pros and cons like I was studying for an exam. But then I thought of that night at the gala, of Olivia's voice saying, "Just smile. You look pretty when you're quiet." I thought of Margaret dismissing my poem, of the bridal shower laughter, of Daniel's smug little grin. And I realized that silence had been killing me all along. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. The next few days, I played my role perfectly, smiling, nodding, running errands, agreeing to Olivia's every demand. She never suspected a thing. Why would she? In her mind, I was still the dependable shadow, too weak to bite. But beneath the mask, I was sharpening my weapons. I edited the recordings into a crisp, devastating montage. Olivia, in her own voice, dismantling the image she had built. I paired the clips with photos of her smiling on stage, quotes from her Instagram posts about authenticity and service. The hypocrisy was damning. And then, in one of my notebooks, I wrote a line that became my mantra: her empire will crumble, not because I shout, but because I whisper the truth. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. My mother came into my room, smoothing the hem of my dress laid out on the chair. "You look lovely, Nora. I'm proud of you, you know. You've been such a help to Olivia." Her words twisted like a knife, but I kissed her cheek and smiled. Thanks, Mom, because tomorrow the story would change. Tomorrow, the dependable cousin would become the author of her own narrative, and Olivia would finally understand what it felt like to be laughed at, not adored, not on my watch, not anymore. The morning of Olivia's wedding dawned like a painting, soft pink skies, air still damp from a night of rain, the estate glowing with polished perfection. From the outside, it looked like the beginning of a fairy tale. Inside, I knew it was about to become something else entirely. Guests arrived in sleek cars, laughter spilling into the gardens. The air buzzed with perfume, champagne, and anticipation. Olivia had orchestrated every detail: the white roses trailing down the aisle, the crystal chandeliers strung across the courtyard, the quartet tuning their instruments. She was radiant, yes, but beneath the glow I could see it, the hunger. Today was not about love, it was about her empire, her image, her dominance. And today I would take it away. I wore a simple navy dress, understated compared to the sequins and silks around me. It was intentional. I wanted to blend in until the exact moment I didn't. My phone was tucked inside my clutch, heavy with the recordings I had edited into one seamless reel of Olivia's hypocrisy. I had timed it to perfection. The ceremony unfolded like clockwork. Daniel stood at the altar, handsome in his tailored suit, flashing smiles to the cameras. Olivia appeared on her father's arm, the picture of grace in white lace, her veil trailing like smoke. The guests gasped as if they'd never seen a bride before. Margaret dabbed her eyes dramatically. My mother clutched my hand, whispering, "Isn't she beautiful?" She was. But beauty can't hide rot forever. The vows were syrupy, rehearsed lines about partnership and eternity. Olivia's voice trembled at the right moments, her smile dazzling the crowd. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, applause thundered. They kissed, cameras flashed, and Olivia basked in the adoration like a queen. But queens can fall. At the reception, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne towers, and 100 expectant faces. Speeches began. Daniel's parents spoke first, then Margaret, then a parade of bridesmaids who told curated stories about Olivia's kindness. Each word was a stitch in the gown of her image, tailored to perfection. Finally, Margaret tapped her glass. And now, a few words from Nora, Olivia's cousin, her steadfast support, her dependable rock. The word hit like a hammer, dependable. Always dependable. The room turned toward me, smiling politely, expecting another quiet thank you speech. Olivia's eyes found mine, smug and certain. She thought she knew me. I rose slowly, clutch in hand, heart pounding so loudly I thought the microphones might pick it up. I stepped onto the stage, the lights hot against my skin. My voice, when it came, was steady. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank Olivia and Daniel for including me in this special day. As many of you know, I've been by Olivia's side through much of this planning. And tonight, I want to share something with you all. Something that shows the real Olivia. A ripple of curiosity passed through the crowd. Olivia's smile faltered, just a flicker. She tilted her head, a warning glint in her eyes. Don't you dare, I dared. With one click, I connected my phone to the projector that had been used for a slideshow of engagement photos. The screen flickered, then filled with Olivia's face, not the polished, angelic Olivia, but the one I had captured in stolen moments. Her voice filled the ballroom. If the florist messes up, I'll ruin her on Instagram. Lauder gasped into silence. Daniel's handsome enough, but God, he's boring. At least he photographs well. Daniel's smile froze, his hand stiffening on his champagne glass. Of course, I care about the kids, but the donors don't need to know I never actually visit the sites. Who has time? Gasps, sharp and audible. Margaret's fork clattered onto her plate. The montage continued, Olivia mocking her bridesmaids, dismissing volunteers, bragging about manipulating sponsors. Each clip cut deeper, unraveling the image she had spent years curating. The room was silent except for her own voice echoing through the speakers. Olivia's face drained of color, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Turn it off, she hissed, but her voice was drowned out by her own words playing overhead. Family is useful. They make me look relatable. When the video ended, I stepped back to the microphone. The silence was thick, suffocating. All eyes were on me. My chest rose and fell steady. That, I said softly, is the cousin I grew up with. The cousin who laughed at my pain, who used me and others as props in her story. You've all seen the Olivia she wants you to see. Tonight you've seen the truth. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then chaos. Gasps, murmurs, people whispering into phones. Daniel stood, his face pale with fury. Is this true? He demanded, turning to Olivia. She stammered. It's out of context. She's lying. Daniel. She. But the proof was undeniable. Her own voice. Her own Margaret sputtered, Nora, how dare you? I cut her off. No, Aunt Margaret, how dare you excuse her cruelty all these years? How dare you teach me that silence was safety? You raised Olivia to believe she could do anything to anyone and still be adored. Well, not anymore. The crowd shifted. Some guests looked disgusted, others sympathetic. A few shook their heads, already reaching for their coats. Olivia's brand, her spotless, perfect empire, was collapsing in real time like a stage set falling apart. Olivia lunged toward me, her voice shrill. You jealous little. I stepped back, calm. You always told me I looked pretty when I was quiet. Tonight, Olivia, I'm not quiet anymore. The words landed like a slap. She froze, her face twisted between fury and disbelief. Daniel shoved his chair back, muttering, We'll talk about this later. Before storming off, Margaret chased after him, frantic, her pearls bouncing against her chest. Guests began leaving in clusters, whispering, phones buzzing with texts. The room emptied of applause and filled with shame. Olivia stood in the wreckage, mascara streaking, her perfect world unraveling. And I walked off the stage, head high, heart steady, as the whispers followed me. In that moment, I felt something I had never felt before: power. Not the cruel, manipulative power Olivia wielded, but the kind that comes from finally telling the truth. For years, she had laughed at my pain. Tonight, I watched her choke on hers, and it was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The wedding reception never truly recovered. The music sputtered back on, yes, and the waitstaff kept circulating trays of champagne, but the air had shifted into something sharp and brittle. People whispered in corners, their eyes darting between Olivia and me as if afraid to be caught on the wrong side of history. Olivia tried. God, she salvaged it. She stood at the microphone after my video ended, forcing a laugh that came out cracked. Come on, everyone, we all vent sometimes, don't we? Those were private moments, twisted and spliced together. You know me, you know my heart, but the guests didn't nod. They didn't reassure her, they had heard her too clearly, seen the mask slip too far. Daniel stood stiffly beside her, jaw tight, not reaching for her hand. Aunt Margaret fluttered around them, frantic, whispering to donors who wouldn't meet her eyes. I left quietly, slipping out into the cool night. My mother caught my arm near the doors, her face pale. Nora, what did you do? I held her gaze. I told the truth. Her lips trembled. They'll never forgive you. Margaret will. Margaret doesn't get to decide my life anymore, I interrupted. My voice surprised me. Steady, certain, a voice that didn't apologize. Neither does Olivia. For once, my mother didn't argue. She just looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, her shoulders sinking under the weight of all the years she had chosen silence. I kissed her cheek and walked into the night, my heels clicking against the stone steps like punctuation marks. The days that followed were a storm. The video spread like wildfire, ripped from the projector, recording onto phones and social media. Hashtags bloomed overnight. Olivia exposed, a behind the mask of fake philanthropy. Sponsors pulled back from her charity. Donors demanded explanations. Daniel's family released a statement calling the matter under review, their polished way of saying they wanted distance. Olivia tried damage control. She went live on Instagram, tears glittering, claiming I had doctored the audio, but people weren't buying it. Too many voices had recognized the contempt in hers. Too many had seen the timing on her wedding night, no less. Her brand of effortless grace, of spotless kindness, had shattered. And me, for the first time, people noticed me not as Olivia's cousin, not as dependable Nora, but as someone with a voice. Strangers messaged me online. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for showing what's behind the curtain. Thank you for being brave. It was intoxicating, but also terrifying. I hadn't planned on being a headline. I'd planned on being free. Yet the story had taken on a life of its own, and I stood at the center of it, blinking in the light. At home, Margaret called, her fury venomous through the line. Do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed your cousin's future. You've humiliated this family. Shame on you, Nora. I let her rant until her voice cracked. Then I said quietly, no, Aunt Margaret, Olivia destroyed herself. I just let people hear it. She gasped like I'd struck her. Ungrateful girl, we took you in, we. You erased me. I cut in, my hand trembling but my voice strong. All my life, you told me my place was in Olivia's shadow. Not anymore. I'm not your prop. I'm not her assistant. I'm me. I hung up before she could reply. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. The biggest surprise came a week later in the form of an email. Julie's, the editor I had once been too scared to reply to, wrote back after I sent more pages. Nora, your voice is raw, sharp, necessary. I'd like to feature your piece in our fall issue. We'll need edits, of course, but there's something here that matters. Don't stop. I read the words over and over until tears blurred the screen. Not tears of pain this time, but of something cleaner, relief, validation. A door opening where I had once only seen walls. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote until dawn. Not about Olivia, not directly, but about silence, about the weight of invisibility, about finding your voice when the world tells you to swallow it. The words poured out, fierce and unashamed. For once, I wasn't writing in secret. I was writing to be heard. Of course, Olivia tried to rebuild. She posted carefully curated photos of herself healing, surrounded by flowers, sipping tea with captions about resilience. Some followers stayed, clinging to the version of her they loved, but the shine was gone. She couldn't erase the sound of her own voice, sneering at the very people who had adored her. Daniel filed for an annulment within 2 months. Whispers of his family pressuring him swirled, but I knew the truth. Olivia wasn't useful to him anymore. Her mask had cracked, and without it, she had nothing he wanted. Margaret retreated, her influence dimmed. At family gatherings, the ones she still bothered to host, the room was quieter, thinner, less grand. And me, for the first time, I wasn't invisible. Cousins I barely knew pulled me aside to whisper, "You were brave." My mother looked at me differently, not with fear, with something that felt like pride, though she struggled to say it out loud. One evening, months later, I walked past the mirror again. I stopped studying my reflection. The woman staring back at me wasn't smaller than she was anymore. She was whole. I thought of that night at the gala, of Olivia's laugh cutting through the air, of how it had burned. And I thought of the silence I had shattered at her wedding. It wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. Olivia had built her empire on appearances. I had torn it down with the truth, and in the rubble, I had found something I'd been missing all my life myself. I whispered to the mirror, to the girl I used to be, "You're not invisible. You never were." And for once, I believed it. That was the thing about revenge. It wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning. For years, my cousin laughed at my pain, but in the end, my voice, the one she tried to silence, became the sound that broke her world apart. And as her empire crumbled, I built mine word by word, page by page.